Alex had never seen a letter like this before. It wasn't the usual HOA newsletter or friendly reminder. This was different, short, sharp, and unsettling. The envelope was crisp, the typewritten words cold and official. Immediate removal of your greenhouse is required. Failure to comply within 30 days will result in fines and legal action. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the page as if it might change if he looked long enough. The greenhouse, his sanctuary, a place where the early morning light filtered through glass panes, where tiny seedlings stretched towards warmth and promise. It had stood in his backyard for years, a quiet testament to patience and care. No one had ever objected before. Why now? The question echoed through his mind as the clock ticked steadily. Outside, the neighborhood stirred with its usual calm. Children biking, neighbors chatting, near-trimmed hedges, birds calling from the trees. But inside, Alex's storm was beginning to build. He remembered the day he built the greenhouse. It had been an idea he'd nurtured long before moving here. He wanted a place to grow things, vegetables, flowers, rare herbs that connected him to the earth despite the suburban sprawl. The HOA had said nothing then. No objections, no warnings. In fact, several neighbors had admired the structure. But now, this letter arrived like a sudden storm cloud, dark and unexpected. Alex folded the letter carefully and stood, his gaze drifting toward the backyard. Through the kitchen window, the greenhouse glinted in the sunlight. It seemed almost to hold its breath, waiting. There was something deeper here. He could feel it. The polite formalities of the HOA masked a force that wanted this going on fast. But why? Later that day, Alex found himself walking the neighborhood, watching the familiar houses with new eyes. The lawns were neat, the fences freshly painted, but there was something under the surface, a quiet tension. An invisible boundary he had unknowingly crossed, that at the next HOA meeting, he planned to speak. He had questions. The evening arrived. With the sun sinking low behind the trees, Alex sat in the crowded meeting room, the air thick with murmurs and the scent of stale coffee. Faces turned toward him as he entered, the usual neighbors. Some friends, some strangers. But the mood was different. When it was his turn, Alex stood and asked directly, "Why now? Why has the HOA suddenly decided my greenhouse must go?" The chairperson offered a tight smile, then replied, "The community standards have evolved. Structures like greenhouses don't fit the new vision for our neighborhood. But this greenhouse has been here for years without complaint," Alex said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "It was part of my original plan for this property." A board member exchanged a glance with another. "Rules apply to everyone, regardless of history," came the reply. The room felt colder, the friendly neighborhood facade slipping away. Whispers started questions without answers. Alex felt the weight of unspoken judgments and unseen alliances forming. Driving home that night, Alex's mind raced. There was more to this than just a disagreement over glass and plants. Someone, or something, wanted the greenhouse gone. And if the letter was the first move, what came next? As he approached his house, the greenhouse stood silhouetted against the moonlight. It looked smaller somehow, fragile beneath the stars. Alex touched the door, feeling the rough wood beneath his fingers. This was more than a building. It was a symbol of hope, of the future he had imagined for himself and this community. He knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't give up without a fight. The next HOA meeting came faster than Alex expected. He walked into the small community hall with a sense of unease tightening around his chest. The room buzzed with quiet conversations, but the atmosphere was different this time, more guarded, less welcoming. Faces that once smiled now held wary expressions, and whispers halted as he passed by. Alex found a seat near the back, eyes scanning the room. The board members sat stiffly at the front, their posture formal, almost rehearsed. The chairperson's gaze met his briefly, cool and unreadable. The meeting began with routine business budget updates, upcoming events, but the tension was thick beneath the surface. When the agenda moved to property concerns, the room shifted. "Mr. Anderson," the chairperson said, calling his full name, "we're here to discuss the greenhouse issue." Alex stood, feeling every pair of eyes settle on him. "I want to understand why the HOA suddenly decided my greenhouse is no longer welcome," he said, voice steady but firm. "It's been part of my property for over 7 years without complaint." A board member named Claire, who often spoke with sharp precision, responded, "The neighborhood's standards are evolving. We must maintain uniformity and property values. Structures like greenhouses disrupt that harmony." Alex frowned, but the greenhouse was included in the original plans for this development. "It's not an addition, it's part of the vision that shaped this community." Claire exchanged a glance with another board member, then replied, "Those plans are outdated. Our community has changed, and the rules reflect that." Murmurs spread among the neighbors. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked uncertain. Alex sensed the tide was shifting, but he wasn't ready to give in. After the meeting, several neighbors approached him cautiously. Mrs. Henderson, a kindly older woman, whispered, "I remember when the neighborhood was first built. The greenhouse was supposed to be a highlight. It's strange how things have changed." Others kept their distance, eyes flickering with doubt or fear. Alex realized the community was divided, caught Between loyalty to tradition and pressure to conform, determined to uncover the truth, Alex spent the following days at the local library and town hall, sifting through archives and public records. The deeper he dug, the more inconsistencies he found. HOA meeting minutes from years ago mentioned the greenhouse as a unique feature, celebrated for its sustainable design, but recent documents showed abrupt rule changes, seemingly aimed at excluding structures like his. It wasn't just about aesthetics or property values, it was personal. Someone on the board wanted the greenhouse gone, and no one was saying why. One afternoon, as Alex returned home, he noticed a group of men surveying the neighborhood, taking notes. When they spotted him, their expressions hardened, and they quickly moved on. The unease grew heavier. Was the HOA planning something bigger? A new development project? A secret agenda? At night, Alex's thoughts circled relentlessly. He sat by the greenhouse, tracing the outlines of the plants inside, wondering how many more days it would stand. The glass walls seemed fragile against the creeping storm outside. The community he once called home felt alien now. Friendly faces turned cautious, warmth replaced by suspicion. Yet beneath it all, a spark of defiance burned bright. He wasn't just fighting for a building. He was fighting for a piece of the neighborhood's soul, for a future he still believed in. The next move was clear. Alex had to confront the HOA again, but this time armed with more than questions. He needed proof. And as he prepared for what lay ahead, a single thought echoed in his mind. Sometimes, the past holds the key to the future. Alex opened the thick folder on his dining table, pages spread out like puzzle pieces waiting to be assembled. The documents were yellowed with time, some bearing faded ink and embossed seals. He had gathered deeds, building permits, architectural blueprints, anything connected to the origins of the neighborhood. But it wasn't just old paperwork he was after. He was chasing a memory, a single name, tucked away on one of the earliest development plans. Stopped him cold. Alexander E. Anderson, development consultant, lead planner, his own name. There it was in black and white, printed at the bottom of the founding design packet from over a decade ago. He stared at it, stunned. How had he forgotten? Or more accurately, how had the neighborhood forgotten? Back then, the land had been wild and empty. Alex had worked with a small firm focused on eco-forward communities, walkable streets, native landscaping, shared green spaces. He had been young, passionate, and deeply involved in shaping the layout of the entire neighborhood. He hadn't owned this house yet, but he'd walked this plot. He remembered sketching out where the greenhouse would go, long before the first brick was laid. Now that memory returned with razor clarity. The greenhouse had never been a personal act, had been part of the original community plan, a cornerstone of the neighborhood's identity, a demonstration of sustainability. So what had happened? How had his vision been erased? Alex carefully placed the documents in order, slid them into a binder, and stared out at the glass structure, glowing faintly in the yard. It looked different now, not fragile, but forgotten. And something told him someone wanted it forgotten on purpose. Later that evening, he visited one of the few residents who had lived in the neighborhood since the beginning. Marian Turner's porch light was still on. She answered the door with cautious curiosity, but softened when she recognized him. Alex Anderson, she said, eyes widening slightly. I always thought you looked familiar. You helped build this place, didn't you? I did, Alex said quietly, but the board seems to have forgotten. She motioned him inside, and over tea, they talked for over an hour. Marian remembered everything. The plans, the vision, even the community meeting where the greenhouse idea was approved unanimously. Back then, it wasn't about cookie-cutter rules, she said, her voice edged with disappointment. It was about trying something new. That greenhouse was supposed to inspire the rest of us. Alex left her home with more than a cup of tea. He now had a witness. The next morning, he printed copies of the development plans and Marian's signed statement. He included early HOA newsletters that featured the greenhouse as a model of sustainable living. He prepared a clean packet date, indexed, undeniable. But as he walked toward the HOA office to submit the packet formally, he noticed something strange. The door was locked. A handwritten sign read, "Closed for administrative restructuring." He knocked anyway. No answer. Someone was delaying the process, buying time, hiding. He stepped back, uneasy. This wasn't just about an old structure anymore. Someone in the HOA had tried to bury the community's past, and that meant they had something to lose. If the truth came out, Alex walked back home, the binder under his arm like a shield. He wasn't imagining things. The board didn't just want his greenhouse gone, they wanted to erase the man who built it. That night, as the wind stirred the ivy against the glass panes, he knew this wasn't over. He'd built this place once before. Now he'd have to save it from the people who claimed to protect it. Alex didn't sleep much after the discovery. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind turned over the same questions: who had buried the old records? Who stood to gain from pretending the greenhouse never belonged? And why now? The next day he took a different route home, not through the main road where the homes looked identical and eyes watched from drawn curtains, but through the side streets. He wasn't just avoiding the HOA anymore, he was observing. There on a small corner lot was something new, an empty foundation, wooden Stakes jutted from fresh dirt, wrapped in fluorescent tape. A clipboard with permits flapped against a post. Alex parked and approached. One of the permits caught his eye, signed just a few weeks ago. Commercial use variance. His breath caught. They were building something that didn't belong. Back home, he laid the clipboard photos beside his binder. The old plans for the community didn't just include his greenhouse. They excluded commercial development entirely. The community was supposed to be lonely with small green zones and open space, not business use. This wasn't about the greenhouse being out of code. It was standing in the way. He didn't wait. That evening, he sent scanned copies of the original development plans and Marion's witness letter to every resident's mailbox, physically and digitally. He included a map showing how his greenhouse fit into the original design and how the new foundation didn't. He signed, "It's simply a neighbor who helped build this place." Within hours, replies trickled in, some curious, others suspicious. But a few messages more than he expected were supportive. "I always wondered why they were pushing so hard on you. I didn't know you designed the neighborhood. Why didn't they tell us? Why would they hide the original plans?" But there were consequences. The next morning, Alex awoke to shouting. A crew was at his property line, measuring tape in hand, 2 HOA board members standing beside them. "We're here to assess encroachment," one said without greeting. "You can't just," Alex began. But the man cut him off. "This is official business," he snapped. "And you've started distributing misinformation. That's a violation of community cohesion." Alex held his ground. "I've shared public documents, records you suppressed. And if you're breaking community code by greenlighting commercial construction, people deserve to know." The board member's face tightened. "This is your final warning." They left. But the message was clear. Alex wasn't just dealing with bureaucracy. He was stepping on something bigger. That night, Marion stopped by his house, visibly shaken. "They approached me," she said, wringing her hands. "They told me I could be removed from the advisory committee if I keep stirring things up." Alex frowned. "So they're threatening you now?" She nodded. "They said my memory is unreliable, that I'm confused about timelines." Alex clenched his jaw. "They're trying to discredit anything they can't control." Marion touched his arm gently. "I believe in what you're doing. Just be careful." After she left, Alex stared out the window at his greenhouse, the soft glow of light inside casting long shadows over the lawn. The truth was out now. But it was only the beginning, because if the HOA was willing to rewrite history, mislead the neighborhood, and threaten those who stood in the way, what else were they hiding? Alex opened his laptop and began drafting a formal challenge to the HOA's authority, complete with maps, statements, and legal precedent. They had declared war with a letter, but he was about to answer with the one thing they hadn't expected: history. The HOA didn't respond publicly to Alex's document release, not in a meeting, not in a statement. They went silent, but the silence was strategic. It was the calm before the next strike. 2 days later, a letter appeared on Alex's doorstep. This one was thicker than the last, sealed in a heavy, official-looking envelope. Inside was a formal notice of non-compliance, citing over a dozen violations, everything from unapproved alterations to environmental risk. Each accusation was vague and difficult to disprove. But that wasn't the point. "We're burying him in paper." Alex flipped through the pages, each one colder than the last. They weren't trying to prove he was wrong. They were trying to exhaust him into giving up. But it was too late for that. Later that evening, Alex stepped into his backyard to water the greenhouse. He noticed the scent, first faint, chemical, sour. He paused, then saw brown streaks on the corner of the greenhouse floor. Some of the planters looked shriveled. Leaves that were healthy days ago were now limp, discolored. He crouched and touched the soil. It was wet, too wet tanned. It smelled off. Someone had tampered with it. He stood there in the growing dark, pulse pounding. This wasn't just paperwork anymore. Someone had come onto his property. Someone had tried to ruin what they couldn't remove legally. And still, the board said nothing. Alex spent the night compiling security footage from the cameras near his porch. The greenhouse didn't have a direct angle, but the side yard did. He watched until, just past midnight the night before, a hooded figure slipped through the bushes along the edge of his property. No face, no distinguishing marks. But their target was obvious. The greenhouse. The next day, Alex made 3 moves. First, he filed a police report, not because he expected action, but because he wanted it documented. Second, he uploaded a short video summary to the neighborhood online forum. In a calm voice, he explained the damage, the footage, and the sequence of events that started with a harmless structure and led to criminal sabotage. And third, he knocked on doors. One by one, he began speaking directly with neighbors, especially the quiet ones who had remained on the sidelines, not to sway them, but to tell the story they weren't hearing from the board. Some were surprised, some were skeptical, but a few, importantly, were angry. "I joined this neighborhood because of that greenhouse," one man told him. "It was in the brochure back when they were selling us this place as a model for green living. Now they want to erase it." Another said, "They told us it wasn't legal, but if you're the one who helped design this place." Word spread. Not loud, not flashy, but steady, persistent. And the HOA noticed. That weekend, Alex received a sudden invitation to a private mediation session with the board. The message came with no context, just a date, a time, and a veiled reminder. Failure to appear may result in accelerated enforcement. Alex arrived early. The board's usual cool professionalism was gone. Now they were measured, controlled, too controlled. A legal representative sat silently beside them, a thick folder in hand. "We've reviewed your claims," the chairperson said without looking at him, "and we're prepared to offer you a compromise." Alex waited. "You agree to dismantle the greenhouse within 45 days. In exchange, we'll drop all pending violations and restore your good standing with the community." He said nothing. Claire leaned forward. "You've caused quite a stir, but you're alone in this. No one else is fighting with you." Alex met her eyes. "You're wrong about that." And he placed a small folder on the table containing signed letters from 10 residents who now supported his case. He stood up. "You can offer deals. You can bury me in paper, but the truth is out, and people are watching now. I'm not going anywhere." The room was silent as he walked out. Outside, the wind picked up through the hedges, and for the first time in weeks, the greenhouse didn't look like a target. It looked like a line drawn in the sand. The following week brought a strange calm to the neighborhood. No more letters, no more inspectors at the property line, no surprise violations. But Alex had lived in silence before, and this silence didn't feel like peace, it felt like planning. He spent his mornings repairing the greenhouse, replacing damaged soil, trimming wilted plants, patching the cracks someone had tried to shatter. The structure, delicate and honest, had begun to feel like a reflection of himself, weathered, but standing. Then came the message. An emergency HOA meeting was scheduled. Mandatory attendance, no agenda listed. Neighbors began murmuring again, this time with confusion instead of certainty. Alex watched from his front steps as people clustered on sidewalks, speculating, trying to fill in the blanks. Some glanced his way with subtle nods, others avoided his eyes. By the time the meeting began, the community hall was packed. The board sat at the front like judges at a tribunal. Their usual calm seemed forced. Claire's hand tapped silently against the table as the chairperson rose and cleared his throat. "We've called this meeting," he said, "to address a matter threatening the order and integrity of our neighborhood." No one spoke, but everyone knew who he meant. Alex remained seated in the third row, still and focused. The chairperson continued. "One of our residents has attempted to challenge the authority of this board, using outdated, incomplete documents and disruptive tactics. These efforts, though persistent, are misleading and dangerous." Whispers began in the back. Claire stood next. "We've reviewed the original development documents and spoken with former planning officials. There is no legal requirement for the greenhouse. It's not protected. It was a personal project, nothing more." Alex stood slowly. "Then why?" he asked, voice clear. "Is my name printed on the development plan, signed by the original design team, and filed with the town planner's seal?" Claire hesitated. The chairperson quickly interjected. "Irrelevant. The board has the right to revise guidelines in the interest of the community's evolving needs." Alex held up a document, but not when those revisions break zoning regulations. He stepped forward. "I contacted the city zoning office. I sent them your permits for that new construction lot. The commercial variance you filed, it conflicts directly with the neighborhood's original residential zoning. That permit has now been flagged for review. If you continue, the city can halt construction. You know what that means for your investors?" The room buzzed with surprise. Someone near the front turned and whispered, "Investors." Alex nodded. "That's what this has really been about. Not my greenhouse, not harmony." The HOA board signed a private agreement to allow a corporate cafe franchise on the edge of the neighborhood, quietly without a vote. "My greenhouse stood in the way of visibility from the road." Claire's voice cracked. "You can't prove I am." "Have the draft contract leaked by someone inside your circle." The board froze. Gasps rippled through the room. The crowd shifted. Angles changed. Faces that had once been neutral were now visibly shaken. One resident stood, then another, and another. "We demand a vote." Someone called. "A real vote." "Show us the contract," said another. "This isn't the neighborhood we signed up for." The board tried to regain control, but the crowd was no longer listening. Claire stepped back from the table, her expression faltering for the first time. Alex looked around the room not with triumph, but with relief. The weight he had carried for weeks now belonged to the community, and they weren't letting it go. That night, he returned home, the binder under his arm, the lights of the greenhouse glowing warm behind him. But as he opened his front door, a single envelope lay on the floor. No address, no stamp. Inside was a photograph, black and white, blurry. A man standing inside the greenhouse. The photo was dated 3 days before the poisoning. And suddenly, Alex realized this wasn't over. Yet, the photograph didn't make sense. Alex sat in his kitchen under the dim light, the image spread on the table beside a half-drunk cup of tea, gone cold. The timestamp was clear: 3 days before the chemical damage. The shadowed figure stood near the greenhouse's back wall, slightly hunched, possibly reaching into the soil. but the image was grainy. It didn't show a face, just the silhouette of a man in a hooded jacket, head down still. There was one detail Alex couldn't ignore. Ring large and silver gleamed on the figure's hand. He'd seen it before, not long ago. That night, Alex couldn't sleep. He sat by the greenhouse, the soft glow from inside casting long shadows on the grass. A breeze whispered across the lawn, but the silence didn't calm him. Who would sabotage it, and why leave the photo now? The next morning, he made a list every board member, every vocal critic, anyone who had motive to stop him. Then, one by one, he started crossing names off. Too new to the board. Too old to crouch like that. Not tall enough. Not left-handed. Then a memory hit him hard when he hadn't connected. A week before the sabotage, during his first in-person argument with the HOA, he'd seen a man sitting in the corner of the boardroom, saying nothing, just watching. A man with a large silver ring on his left hand. Not a board member, but present. Alex dug through the meeting notes and found him. Ethan Hale, community planning consultant. It didn't sound right. There was no record of Ethan in any of the original files, and no one had mentioned a consultant being involved in the new construction plans. Alex made calls. 3 different residents confirmed they'd seen Ethan with Claire twice outside her house, once during a quiet lunch on the far end of town. Then, Marion called. "Alex," she said, voice tight. "Something's wrong. Claire's resigning from the board. She just sent a message to the advisory group. She says she's stepping down immediately for personal reasons." Alex's grip on the phone tightened. Before the investigation, Marion sighed. She knows something's coming, and Alex now knew why. Claire hadn't acted alone. She wasn't the mastermind. She'd been protecting someone with a stake in the commercial project and a reason to eliminate Alex's influence. Alex drove to the city permit office the next morning. After a few hours of waiting and explaining, he managed to access the special request files for the commercial permit. There, buried in the co-applicant list, was the name, Ethan Hale, private investor and architectural consultant. He wasn't just advising, he was funding part of the development. Alex photocopied everything. On the way out, he asked the clerk one last question. "Does this man have ties to any other developments?" She typed, then paused. "Actually, yes. He helped develop a similar community project 10 years ago. The project fell apart. Several lawsuits, allegations of fraud. You want the details? I think I need them." By evening, Alex had everything he needed. A thick packet. Contracts, public records, financial ties, proof that Ethan wasn't just pushing for development. He was rerunning a failed scheme under the protection of a cooperative HOA board. He brought it all to Marion. She stared at the papers, hands trembling. "We trusted them. I don't think Claire knew the full truth until it was too late," Alex said quietly. "But now that she's out, Ethan's exposed." They stared at each other, the gravity settling between them. "I'll speak at the next meeting," Marion said. "If you'll stand with me, I will." Outside, the greenhouse lights flickered. A short burst, like a breath. Alex turned toward it and paused. The door was slightly open. He hadn't left it that way. Inside, among the ferns and citrus trees, a note was pinned to the wall with a thumbtack. 4 words, scrawled in ink. "You built this?" Remember. The next HOA meeting wasn't held in the usual community room. It had been moved unexpectedly to the larger recreation center across from the park. No one said why, but everyone suspected the same thing. Something big was coming. Alex arrived early. He stood quietly by the windows as neighbors filed in. The air was heavier than usual. No casual greetings, no polite smiles. Everyone knew about Claire's resignation. Most had seen the photograph of the cafe's construction permit, now suspended by city review. And rumors had already started about a man named Ethan Hale. But Alex wasn't here for rumors. He was here to expose truth. Marion walked in just before the meeting started, holding the folder with everything they had gathered: contracts, records and documents, tracing Ethan's development fraud in another town. She gave Alex a nod, her mouth drawn in a tight line. Then Ethan entered. He wasn't hiding. In fact, he smiled as he stepped into the center aisle and took a seat near the front row, perfectly visible. He wore the same ring, the same polished calm. But behind his eyes, Alex saw it, or fear wearing arrogance as armor. The chairperson, now without Claire, tried to begin as if things were normal. "Thank you all for coming. We'll be addressing recent disruptions to community, business, and reviewing conduct concerns involving certain residents." "Before we do that," Marion interrupted, stepping forward, "I'd like to speak as a longtime member of this community's advisory group." A murmur swept the crowd. The chairperson shifted uncomfortably. This is not the time for Alex stood beside her. It is now. Together, they approached the front and turned to face their neighbors. Marion raised the folder. "You've heard stories about the greenhouse? You've heard words like illegal and non-compliant, but you haven't heard the full story, because the people saying those words had something to hide." She opened the folder and held up the development maps, the originals with Alex's name printed clearly on the planning documents. This greenhouse wasn't an afterthought. It was part of the original design. It was approved, was preserved. until a new construction plan led by someone not even living in this community threatened to make it an obstacle. Alex stepped forward. Ethan Hale, consultant, investor, and the man whose last development ended in lawsuits and failed permits. Gasps and whispers spread again. Alex didn't slow down. He hid behind HOA authority, behind Claire, behind the board, but what he wanted was an order. It was a profit. Marginally. He tried to erase part of this neighborhood's history to install something that would make him money. That's not leadership. That's manipulation. Ethan rose slowly, arms crossed. You're speculating. You have no proof I acted in bad faith. Marion opened the final page in the folder and held it high, a signed agreement, naming Ethan as the lead investor in a corporate cafe development stamped and notarized. I think this is enough for the city to pursue further review, she said. Ethan's smile cracked. That document was internal. Not anymore, Alex cut in. You left a paper trail. And just like that, the board's illusion shattered. Residents stood. A few shouted. One demanded Ethan be removed from any further decisions. Another called for a complete audit of the board's actions over the last 2 years. The chairperson tried to call for order, but no one listened. By the end of the night, the meeting had turned into a vote. Not on Alex. On the board, 2 members stepped down. Ethan left without a word, the ring still shining under the hallway lights. Outside, under a calm night sky, Marion turned to Alex and smiled. It's over, she said, but Alex shook his head. No, it's just beginning. She raised a brow. Now we rebuild it. The greenhouse, the trust, the reason this place was special in the first place. He looked out across the neighborhood quiet, watching, changed, and for the first time, in weeks, he didn't feel like he was defending the past. He was planting something new.